Did you know that Airbnb will actually show you in Airbnb the listings that they're comparing you against and who is
How?
booked and who is not booked for certain dates?
No? How'd you do
It's a very hidden feature that I don't see too many people ever talk about. But
that?
I track my own comps for the Des Moines market. That's where a lot of my listings are. And I also know which of those comps Airbnb in platform has as a comp for me too. I pay attention to their pricing. I pay attention to when they're booked and I'm not booked. And I pay attention to when they get booked, how much they get booked for.
Why don't we save this for another video? That is super
Okay.
intriguing. All right, guys, we're back. I'm back here with Carson, and he's going to walk us through exactly how he uses Airbnb to figure out who his competitors are and everything else. Now, I have not looked into this prior to Carson showing me it in just a few moments because I want to have a genuine reaction and have a genuine conversation about everything when it comes to this tool and how he uses it. So, with that being said, Carson, the floor is yours. Walk us through this tool that you highlighted about a month ago and let's get into it.
Awesome. Thanks, John. And, he didn't look any of this up beforehand. He actually told me he wanted to be genuinely surprised as we started stepping through this,
I've
which
been
I appreciate.
I've been doing Airbnb since 2017. I've never heard of this. And so I want to, who you're getting compared with by Airbnb is a huge deal, right? Those are the people you're competing directly with.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I like about Airbnb more than other OTAs is the fact that they do actually provide a lot of resources for hosts. Now, they may not always make it the easiest to find, but if you know what you're looking for in platform, there's a lot of great resources there. And some people have mixed reviews on them. And John, I think this ties back to like your philosophy on AirDNA and how some people don't like it, but we come back to if you know how to use it and you can take it for what it is and apply it appropriately, it can be very useful for your business. And that's what I view some of these Airbnb tools being where out of the box, it's looking at averages, and averages sometimes aren't going to be the most helpful, but there are ways that we can drill in. There's questions we can ask, and it can start to directionally help us be more informed hosts and also improve our listing. So I always like to make that little caveat too that, you know, come into this with an open opinion and an open mind, because I promise you there are ways that this is going to be helpful and beneficial.
Okay, enough teasing. Let's let's get into it.
So I'm going to kind of walk you through the progression of how I think about this. And I will caveat, I do have some personal resources that I make that I won't necessarily show here, but I will walk you through the processes of, how I'm approaching this and how we get there. So to start, the way that we find the comps that Airbnb has for us is in our calendar, whether it's the multi-calendar or the listing calendar, we have to go to a specific property. And I'm going to give you kind of like a real world use case. So right now on my calendar, we're looking at late July and early August, which, yay, I'm pretty booked up. But once we scroll a little bit over, the Iowa State Fair is probably one of the biggest things for the entire state of Iowa, and it happens right in this time frame. So if you see these little dots, I have notes all in my calendar specifying specific dates. So another little tip for you hosts, go leave private notes. That way you can always remember these dates are for this event. So the Iowa State Fair is right in here. Now for this particular listing, which is the one I'm going to be using right here, I'm almost completely booked except for these 2 days, which is the Thursday and Friday. And for the Thursday and Friday, this is when they're going to have some of the biggest concerts at the Iowa State Fair. I think Jelly Roll might be performing on Friday night out. So one way that we could actually use this in a very real scenario is I have my nightly prices for a one night stay currently at $156. Now, I could be wondering, is that too high? Is that too low? Since we're still, 3-ish months out, should I shoot higher for a one night stay? And the way that we can start at least directionally backing into the answer of that question is by checking out some of these comps. So I'm actually going to click into that listing and it's going to open up my calendar. And what we have to do is go all the way to that week, which I should have remembered what it was. So we're going to use this 14th right here, right? So when we're in this calendar view, you're going to have your settings panel on the right. And if you click on a date of interest, so in this case, again, I'm going to click on the 14th. It's going to pop open right here, and it's going to have this little bar that says view similar listings. So when I click this view similar listings, it'll pop open a new window. And what it's going to do is give me a map of comps that Airbnb has picked. And over here, we can see booked listings and unbooked listings. So really what I can start to do now is I could click on, oh, I can't do it for just one night. So I'll back out and do it for 2 nights. Uh, but unbooked listings, I can start to get visibility in terms of there's me, my 156. So you actually get a good geo kind of idea too, which they tend to be somewhat compact. But even on this screen in general, since I'm at a 1 night stay, this isn't averages. These are going to be those people's actual price. So I can start to directionally back into if I'm underpriced, overpriced, where I fall based off of these comps. And these are links, right? So I can actually click on this and go open up this person's listing. And I can then start to review and look at this person's listing, check their calendar, which I'll kind of go over here. So high level, that's how you get to it. Again, you have to go into the individual calendar for the listing of interest. You have to pick the dates that you're interested in evaluating. And then when you do click that, that's when you're going to see that view similar listings right here. And we're going to be able to pop that open.
I've got some ideas that I want to ask, but I just want to, before I like get into it, did you explain everything about how you use this, or did you want to go in a little bit deeper about exactly what you do from here?
So I think beyond the pricing, the ways that I use this, and this might actually start leading into what you're going to talk about, John, is there's levels to how we can use this, right? So on a very granular level, we can use this for pricing directionality for open weekends, or when I started that initial use case, even though it didn't show that far in advance, special events, right? It's like you have a special event coming into town and you want to make sure you're priced effectively. Go check out what other people are currently getting booked at, but pay attention to what those listings look like, right? Because data in aggregate can be misleading if there's not qualitative context with it. So you see a bunch of places that are getting booked for 180, but they're in Des Moines proper. Even though there's only about a mile difference between us, it is very different being downtown as opposed to being on the south side. One.
Yep.
Two, what does that listing look like? I also know that a lot of these listings here are like luxury condos and they overlook the river and they are freaking beautiful. So
Right.
they absolutely probably should be getting booked up for 180. Now, that's not to say that my listings aren't nice, but they're duplexes on the south side of Des Moines. They're only so nice compared to,
Yeah.
luxury condos. So you have to be realistic in terms of how you're picking your competitors. And then the one piece that I'll add on top of that is this is a really good way to just build a baseline. Not just any baseline, it is Airbnb's direct baseline to you. And that's what I think is valuable.
Define baseline when you say that.
So what I'll end up doing, or what I did initially, and I continue to do over time, but I don't have to do it as much now because net new listings are fewer and far between, particularly good ones.
Mm-hmm.
But when I first started going through this, when I'm saying baseline is I'm setting the baseline of what my comps are, right? I'm creating that starting list of 20
Mm-hmm.
listings in my immediate area that Airbnb has said that they have as comps for me. And I'm personally picking those 20 to 22 because I agree. I think that they look similar. They have similar amenities. They're in a relatively similar geolocation. The pricing's plus minus 20%. They to me feel like very good comps, and I can also confirm because Airbnb is returning them that they believe that they're comps too. That list, that starting list, you can start to get a lot of information from listings. Now, this just requires some legwork. You have to click into the listing and you can start to pull out information from their calendar, right? I can go
Mm-hmm.
into this person's calendar right now and start making some inferences in terms of how booked up they are, how far in advance they're getting bookings. For nights that they're open, do they have a 2 night minimum stay? Do they have a 3 night minimum stay? And it gives me a good understanding of how well hosted a particular property is. And it gives me a good idea of who my competition is, what they're doing. Are they doing a 4 night minimum stay 3 months out, or are they 2 night minimum stays all the way? Do they allow pets? Do they do this? And I get a very good, deep understanding, not just of my market, but of my direct competitors in my market. And I use that to inform my listing strategy.
So, gonna jump in right then and there because that is the most interesting thing about this whole thing. Like, yes, you can see the prices. Yes, you can see who's booked, who's not booked. But what you're actually seeing here is Airbnb saying these are the guys you're going up against. And I always talk about this. An Airbnb is a business. You're in competition. There's, a lot of people that are going to these markets, and there's a lot of homes that can get booked up. You just want to make sure you're one of those homes that gets booked, right? And so all I'm thinking about right now is my old not old is the way that I have recommended that people do pricing for a very long time. This method is actually a method that I taught to TechVestor when I first started there because I couldn't believe that they weren't doing it. And I strongly believe in this method. I've been using it since 2017. Now, mind you, TechVestor is, light years ahead of it now, but this strategy works very well. And what you're looking at right now is RankBreeze, which is why I asked you if you use RankBreeze. And then you can see here it says competitors, right? Here's my listing and here are the competitors. And what you can also see is how much those listings are going for on a nightly basis. And you can see the Friday, the Saturday, the Sunday. You can see this was all the way back in 2023 that I was talking about this. And this method works so well, right? And so what I would do, like the whole strategy here was I wanted to know exactly what my competitors were priced every single day of the year. I didn't want to have an average number. I wanted to know on a Tuesday in January compared to a Saturday on June what their nightly rate was so that when a guest went and looked for the property, I could be very competitive with them, right? And so I needed to figure out who am I competing with? And I was always guessing. I was always just pulling up like who I thought were really good listings that were fairly similar to me. But what you just showed wasn't a way to actually figure out who Airbnb says your competition is. And then from there, you can select those people. You said you select about 20 people, and then you can add them to a software like RankBreeze. You add it to a Google Sheet. And I believe you can also use Price Labs to be able to do this as well. And you can put in exactly who your competitors are. And I want to stress something here. What I always did was the first handful of listings would be better than my listing. So I would try and find the people who were better than me. And I'd grab like 3 or 4 of them and put them at the top. And the reason being is because I knew that if my price and their price was the exact same, that I was too expensive because they had a better product than I did, right? And then I would have the worst listings at the bottom where I knew for a fact I should be pricing my home more than them. And so then therefore, if I ever lowered my price that amount, I knew that I was giving my home away for less than what it should actually go for. And then obviously you have the ones dead in the middle that make the most sense to be able to compete with, right? So anyways, what I'm trying to say by sharing all of that is simply that everything you're showing allows you to figure out who your competitors are to then create a better comp set to be able to make your pricing even more competitive and accurate when people are deciding which Airbnb they should then rent out. One thing I want to mention here before we finish this off, just a way to think about why this matters so much. I always like to use a chip analogy. So like chips, right? If I had a bag of Doritos, that bag of Doritos will go for, let's say, $5, right? Now, if I have another bag of chips, which is like a no-name brand, cheap version, and it's the plain kind, right? If I have that bag of chips compared to Doritos, that bag of chips, the no-name brand, is always going to be cheaper. Always. If they were ever to be priced the exact same, people would go with the Doritos option. But Doritos is just a better option for a variety of reasons. Your Airbnb is treated the exact same way. If you are a no-name brand of chips, you cannot price yours at the exact same as Doritos because everybody will just buy the Doritos instead because they're getting better value. And so if you can truly understand where your home falls, are you a no-name brand? Are you a Doritos? Are you somewhere in the middle? And then you figure out what all those people are priced at and then make sure you're priced competitively, it'll be a lot easier to get a booking in comparison to not having that kind of knowledge. And this process that Carson, thank you for just showing everybody, will allow you to be able to know exactly who Airbnb is saying you're competing against. So with that being said, I'm going to throw the video that I just showed you about pricing. If you are interested in learning my logic and strategy around pricing, you can click that video and go give it a watch. Other than that, I appreciate you watching this. I hope you found it valuable. If there's anything else that you want us to go through, just comment down below and we can definitely dive deeper into these kind of things. Thanks, guys.